Hey guys, my name is Hab, and this is the 50TP Tyzskiewicza and the 50TP prototype, a duo of Tier 9 heavy tanks. The prototype is basically the first properly added Polish tank, because I pretended the Poodle doesn't exist. And it's been in for a long time, to the point it got its PBR model only recently. But with the entire Polish heavy line now existing in the game for a while, how does it compare to the 50TP Tyzskiewicza? Well, I'll start off with this. The Tyzskiewicza is better out of the box for most people. It does heavy things better than the prototype does. However, the prototype itself is flat out better in some regards, especially reactionary mobility. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's talk stats, starting off with the Tyzskiewicza. I'll be honest and start off with this. The Tyzskiewicza is one of the best tier 9s available right now. And the gun isn't half bad either, which was a thing that kind of surprised me, especially seeing the gun on the 60 TP a tier above. 460 alpha is nothing too special, but that's combined with 8 degrees of gun depression. The E75 in comparison keeps the same 80 degrees of gun depression but loses out on the small bits, slightly less HP and HE pen, slightly worse aim time. The only regard where the E75 outright beats the 50TP is soft gun stats and shell velocity, and the 50TP, dare I say, uses that gun in a more friendly chassis. Not a lot more friendly, but still a bit more. With the prototype, however, it is a little different. First of all, you're not running a 130mm gun, but just quote-unquote a 122, with 440 alpha. That gives it a negligible DPM advantage over the Tyzskiewicza, but the other stats generally remain the same except for the higher APCR pen and best soft stats of the bunch. Overall, it's more of a case of whose grass is greener for these tanks, and I slightly prefer the shorter reload time on the prototype myself. It also has the fastest shell velocity, but not by a lot. As for the armor, this is where things take a rapid detour. The Tyzskiewicza is one of the best armored tier 9 heavies, maybe one of the best armored tier 9s, period. There is only one or maybe two things you should keep in mind when using it on a frontline position, that being the cupolas, which aren't very small, and the driver's viewport on the hull, which is nowhere near well angled as the rest of the front. The lower plate is not small but manageable thanks to that gun depression. One other thing I should mention with the armor profile is that the turret is a little bit too large for the hull, so the hull has these bulges on the side to help maintain that turret size. Which means that if someone knows where to aim, they can still kind of go through while you're side-scraping. It's a similar dilemma like the VK72 has, which I may get to cover in the future. With that in mind, if you're using your gun depression, you're very hard to get through. More so than the E75 in my opinion, mainly cause that tank has an almost flat frontal turret. Doesn't stop people from fumbling shots at it though. With the prototype, however, you can tell that armor took a side role in the entire armor, gun and mobility blend. On paper and on a dead-on look, it might not look that way. A very powerful frontal spearhead plus a great turret, Hab's taken his crazy pills again, you might say. But there's one other thing with the prototype that makes that hull armor more situational than anything. That is the tank's height. The prototype is low to the ground, and before it has a chance to point its gun up at something, you might notice that your effective armor is not so effective anymore. A few degrees up and you lose about 100mm of armor. That's not a small amount. Plus the driver has a similar weak point as on the Tyzskiewicza. Here it's somewhat worse as it's hardly around 190mm of effective armor. The turret itself remains more dependable to the point of remaining competitive with the Tyzskiewicza. With the prototype you have only one real weak spot for many tanks, and that is the cupola. For the people that have past 280mm of armor, they can aim at the top corners of the turret, similar to the K91. It's not a very reliable pen, however, especially if you use that gun depression to your favor. That about explains the armor. The Tyzskiewicza has less work needed for a very sturdy overall profile. The prototype has a more tailor-made profile to its gameplay, but it's easier to go through without any terrain advantages. And now, we've gotten the mobility part of the review. As most of you know, I usually don't cover a lot of things in this area, as it boils down to does it turn fast, does it go fast, alright, there we go. But this time I've got actual comparisons to make, so I can't just easily dismiss this section. And as if that wasn't enough, the difference is stark enough that I have to make this section a little clearer. Starting off with the Tyzskiewicza then. 36 in forward and 15 in reverse is already solid for a heavy tank like this, and the effective horsepower is fine at 14.5 horsepower per ton. Traverse speed is middle of the pack with 32 degrees on hard terrain. But that's of course without the improved gear oil, which I think is a must on most of these heavy tanks. Why? Well, it adds an additional 4 kph both in front and reverse gear. This means that your already fine-moving tank now goes 40 and 19. Plus, it gives a small horsepower per ton advantage, bringing the number above 15. This makes the Tyzskiewicza one of the better moving Tier 9 heavies. The prototype does this just as well and even better. The prototype starts off with 48 and 15 km per hour, making it one of the fastest Tier 9 heavies around. Effective horsepower is about 1 horsepower per ton better than the Tyzskiewicza, and adding on that is the slightly better traverse speed as well. Give it the improved gear oil and, well, you get 52 and 19, making it the fastest Tier 9 heavy, only comparable to the AMX 5120, which goes 50 and 20. This gives you a tank that is far more suited to its heavium role than something like an IS-8, which does not have the versatility to back it up. With the prototype, relocating and finding advantageous terrain is your bread and butter. As for the Tyzskiewicza, you're better off finding a decent spot to park behind and conceal most of your weak points and go ham on the enemy team. To shorten that entire section, the Tyzskiewicza is more suited to slower gameplay and the occasional relocation, but with the prototype you should get used to moving quick and killing quicker. So overall, since this could as well be counted as a review, how do I feel about both of these tanks? Well, I prefer the prototype, and the reason is probably obvious to most people. That reactionary mobility is to die for. A heavy tank going past 50 consistently. Plus some trollish armor to back it up and a decent damage output make this a very good blend of heavium. That subtle 440 alpha and that tasteful low profile. Anyway, the 50 TP prototype is probably the best example of a heavium in this tier. The Tyzskiewicza is less gallant. It's more brutal, more full force with the additional alpha and armor. It fits the traditional heavy role very, very well. So, before we go to replays, let's check the pros and cons of both the tanks. So, the Tyzskiewicza's pros: great armor profile, good gun, decent mobility, and good gun depression. As for the cons, it has prominent weak spots. And for the 50 TP prototype, the pros are great mobility, good gun depression, and versatile. And as for the cons, unreliable armor. Should you get either of them? I'm gonna say yes. The Tyzskiewicza is a good and dependable Tier 9 heavy, which some people might consider just too strong, which is a valid point given how easy it is to manipulate. The prototype has a higher skill requirement, but has great points that make it a very potent heavy tank in its own right. If you have the opportunity to try the prototype out, give it a shot. Anyways, with that very long start now done, time for some replays. Well, it's gonna be two, I'm not exactly a magician. Alright, so I'm on Ghost Factory with the 50 TP, and I'm not gonna be, let's say, delaying the surprise any further. This is gonna be a loss. This is gonna be a loss with a fairly respectable amount of damage, but what I want you to focus on is not the damage, but rather the more static play that I try to do with the Tyzskiewicza every single time I play this thing, at least. So, I've had a bit of an unfortunate driving accident twice here at the start. That KV4 was a little bit more unfortunate since I lost all of my momentum and I could have been in the fight just a bit earlier. But that's not that big a deal considering where I basically stop. So, you see that little factory house there between the rails, and you see that KPF right now. I try to fire, does not go through, but he doesn't either. And this house is where I'll be for most of the battle, at least. At least around that area, around the vicinity of that house. So, I load my shells again, hoping that I can get an actual target in, but that's just incorrect. There's nothing there that I can shoot, so let's fast forward 10 seconds. You can already see that the KV-4 is getting absolutely battered, and here I have an incredible opportunity to use all of my gun depression and nail that K91. I used adrenaline. I think that might have been a bit too premature. If anything, looking at the way that the enemy team then moved, the only thing that it gave me was this additional shot on the T-49, which wasn't even that great of a damage hit. However, the next target is a little bit more cheeky. That's where the relatively decent accuracy of the Tyzskiewicza kicks in. So, you see at T-44, can that hit? He's looking, he thinks he's safe, he's not. 536, absolutely nailed. I did not notice that T-54 and I was preparing to absorb a shot, but that just bounced straight off. That lower plate is really trollish, so is that armor profile. That 252 is gonna be yelling for most of the battle because he thinks he's impenetrable or something, which I had to break it to him, but he makes such a crucial mistake that allows me to just basically nail him entirely by the end of the battle. So, we're on the losing side. I try to nab a few cheap shots into the K91. One's very successful. The other one, I'm not sure yet. I actually don't remember, even though I played this battle 10 minutes back. So, I load the Premo. Pre-fire, perfect. I bounced another shot from 252. You can already see my blocked counter is racking up. I think if I won this battle and survived, I'd have a steel wall. So he's noticed that I'm looking at him. I'm trying to hit his cupola. It just does not go through. From close up, the 252 is actually really easy to fight. From somewhere like that, that's way more difficult. The Waffle wants to try and take a whiff, but I just completely deny that opportunity. And from here, it's mostly a game of cat and mouse with the 252. I just really want you to take the notice at the fact that I have not really moved past this area. Unless the team and the map situation demands it, it's not really that worth it for this thing to move, because it will take way too long and that situation may have already ended. So, I'm gonna force this 252 to act. He dealt a bit of damage into me, but that was because I angled way too far. And now, here is where the 252U makes a critical mistake. You can already see that I can fire at both of his cupolas and the viewport, and it's gonna stay like that until the moment I die, because he kept pushing in. If he stayed at that medium or a little bit longer range, he would have had problems hitting me, but I would have had problems hitting him as well. So, I'm gonna load in the Premo, load in the regular AP and still low roll, but that was still damage. I'm now unfortunately running rather low, so it's basically gonna be a situation of me or him. This is already a settled battle. Here is something he has kind of forgotten. I can look down at his armor profile, completely invalidating it when I fire Premo. And here are the last few seconds. So, I managed to kill him on time, but the almost got me. So overall, nearly 4k damage. Honestly, not bad. Not bad at all. Of course, he was rather salty, but that is what I wanted to point out in this replay, is that more static gameplay of a tank such as this. Of course, the Waffle here, he's pretty much done for. There is no way that you can really salvage this battle, especially against two still rather healthy tanks. Especially with gameplay like that. I still don't know how we managed to rag those 4 kills, but he was useful in the middle stages of this battle. Anyways, let us look at the battle results, shall we? So, We have blocked over 3k damage, and we have almost dealt 4k damage. I would have needed... I think that's actually enough for Steal a Wall if I check my specific characteristics. Yep, I received... It seems that I have received enough hits to gather a Steel Wall. And as for the rest of the team, it was not that hot. However, that's the static gameplay of the Tyzskiewicza. Let us move on to something more mobile, shall we say. Alright, and the second battle is with the 50 TP prototype on a rock field. Just a regular encounter battle, top tier, nothing to really worry about. What I want to point out is the differences between the prototype and the Tyzskiewicza. They might seem a little bit more subtle at first, especially considering that my gameplay isn't stellar. The damage output will end up being nearly the same as with the Tyzskiewicza replay. But this one is actually a win, and that's mainly because I started getting good around the second part. So, the T49, I am actually not sure if he stays valid throughout the entire battle, but I did try to get a cheap, cheeky shot on the Type 68, which did not work out for me at all, which was a bit of a shame. It could have evened the odds a little bit further. But you do see that wiggling and jiggling, hiding behind cover. I do not trust the armor profile on the 50 TP prototype enough to really just utilize it to its full potential. However, here is an easy opportunity for more damage, shall we say. This is the WZ-120. It's not gonna be a WZ for much longer, unfortunately, but I seem to have missed, and I'm trying to bait a shot here from the waffle, but that does not really seem to work, and he hits the T-49 instead, which also nails him. So you can already tell that I'm just moving, jiggling around the map far more, and this is barely the first minute of the battle. However, here is where I start making a lot of mistakes. That Type 68 I should have just loaded Pramo into, immediately nail this turret, and just knocked him out of the battle a bit earlier. That is just my error. However, from here I try to twist it around a little bit further. I see all of these tanks, so I decide, hey, now's the time to reverse. I'll only show them my turret. The only thing that the Marcus Kago can basically shoot at is that turret at that moment, and he is down. So, now that the odds have been evened out a little, I want to nail the Type 68 again, although to be fair, I should have went for the Chimera instead. That would have made this battle a little bit quicker. Type 68 is also one of those people who's just kind of salty at the end. I think he was just completely salting up my chat after the battle, but that's like a whatever. But anyway, yeah, that is pretty much the biggest difference between the prototype and the Tyzskiewicza itself. I finally loaded the Pramo there, but what I want to know is how you play your tanks like this. If you have ever played either of these two, how do you actually try to play them? Is it a conventional heavy style? Is it a blend between heavy and medium like I try to do here in this one? Or is it something completely different? Because I genuinely want to know. This battle is pretty much done and dusted with. The Type 61 almost gets me too. However, I decide to use the wreck of our ally. I think that's the STA one. I want to see if that genuinely works out for me, which it did. And now, basically at nearly the same damage, but almost 3 times less bounced, we are at the end of the battle. And that is what I wanted to show you, is the differences between how I play these two tanks and which one I consider to be better. And technically I consider the prototype to be better, mainly just because it allows me that flexibility in what I try to do. Anyways, feel free to agree or disagree with me in chat or comments later, I don't really mind, but my name is Hab. If you somehow liked this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, whatever, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye.